Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. It's Maya, and here's the video you guys have been waiting for a long time. More young adult book recommendations. If you're new to my channel, I have a whole playlist of book recommendations, and I posted a lot of videos in the past, both for middle grade or young adult books. And I try not to mention the same books in each video so that in each video you got like different book recommendations. So like after this video you can watch those for some more different books. But yeah, let's start out with the first genre, which is contemporary and romance. Basically like real lifey books. First recommendation is This Time It's Real. This is a romance book, and I read this kind of recently, like a month or two ago, and this was just so fun and cute, and I felt like I could relate to a lot of the parts, or like to the main character in some ways, like with her thoughts and stuff. In this book, Eliza, she travels around the world a lot, like moves a lot because of her mom's job, and her family finally moves back to China, which is her birthplace, I think, and she starts attending this school, and she has to write an essay about someone that means a lot to her, but she doesn't feel like writing about a personal connection that she has because she feels that's too personal and she just doesn't want to share that. So she makes up a story about a boyfriend that she actually doesn't have, and that story goes viral and everyone now wants to meet him, and she's getting like people from the news asking for an interview for her and her boyfriend, and she's like, what do I do? And then there's this Chinese drama actor, and she gives him some reasons why they should pretend to fake date and why this would be mutually beneficial, and he agrees. This is basically like a fake dating book, and I really enjoyed this and connected with the characters, so I definitely recommend this. And also I heard that Anne Liang is a really good author of contemporaries and romances, and I recently got her other book, which I've been wanting for so long. It's I Hope This Doesn't Find You. I'm so excited to read this. My aunt got this for my birthday. She made like a whole book bouquet for me, which is so cool because I always saw those like on Book Talk or Pinterest, and I never thought I'd actually receive one. That was just such a sweet gift, and this was one of the books in there. So excited to read this. Our next recommendation is Valley Verified. I read this really recently. I think this is my last read or my last read, but I absolutely love this, devoured it. 5 stars. This was just so addicting, and it felt like binge watching a TV show, like a really good one. This is basically about how Zoe, she works in fashion, like fashion journalism in New York City. It's very hard, it demands a lot, and it's very hard to like get a career in fashion. She's already been doing for like 4 years, but when she gets offered a position at a tech startup in Silicon Valley, Los Angeles, she ends up accepting, and it's like a huge drastic change and so different from what she normally did. But she was hired like as their marketing manager, and it's just so fun to read about how she does that, her campaign. I just loved it so much. This technically I think isn't a young adult book, but it has like nothing inappropriate, and I'd say this is ages 14 or 15 plus. And this book isn't that popular yet. Hopefully it starts getting the hype it deserves soon. Our next recommendation is Tweet Cute. I read this last year and I really liked this also. I forgot what rating I gave it. I think like a 4.5. But this is basically about 2 teenagers, and her family owns like a super mega chain fast food restaurant, and his family owns a small local restaurant, and both are in New York. They start a Twitter war amongst each other, both businesses, and it kind of goes viral and they keep at it. And then also the guy, he made like a texting app amongst people in their school where it's anonymous, and he and she text on there and they don't know it's actually them. But this is really fun also, and I highly recommend. This book is ages 12 plus. Next is a series that I'm literally so obsessed with right now. I finished the series yesterday, and I was reading for hours yesterday because it was so fun and I just wanted to know what happened next. That book series is K-Pop Confidential, and the second book is K-Pop Revolution, which is what I finished yesterday. Words can't even describe how fun this series is. It's about how this regular girl, Candace, K-pop trainee tryouts in her city in New Jersey, and she's like, okay, I'll apply. And she goes, does a rehearsal, and she gets accepted. She flies to Korea, starts training to become a K-pop idol, and it's just so fun and addicting to read about her journey with that, like the insights on K-pop. And I'm not really a K-pop fan, but this is just so fun. Even to someone who doesn't listen to it that often, the writing is just so good, and I laughed a lot, and it was like surprised a lot at the plot twists, and this is definitely a new favorite series. And I think this book is good for like 13 plus maybe. Our next book recommendation is also something to do with K-pop, and that's xoxo. In this book, she's not the one who's like training to be a K-pop star, but her boyfriend is. She basically has a random encounter with him in the US, and then when she moves to Korea to go to school there, he happens to go to the same school, and she's like, what? And since most K-pop idols are not allowed to date, this is also like a forbidden romance. And I think this book is also good for like 13 plus. Next book recommendation is Love and Gelato. In this book, the main character moves to Italy to live with her birth dad, and it's really fun how she explores the country. There's a little romance, and she's trying to uncover mysteries about her mom and why her dad just left for 16 years. And this just has really great summer vibes, and I really enjoyed this. And there's also a book too, which is Love and Luck, which is about her best friend. You don't have to read them in order, but I did. And then there's also a third book, which I don't have yet. It's Love and Olives. All I know is that that one takes place in Greece, and this series is ages 12 plus. Next is Kisses and Croissants. In this book, our main character is a ballerina, and she'll be spending a magical summer in France pursuing her ballerina dreams. So she goes to this boarding school in France for ballet, and it's so fun to read about. Like, I did not expect reading about ballet to be this fun. And there's also a romance and lots of exploring the country, and it's just perfect summer vibes also. I really enjoyed this, and I really love study abroad books, as I mentioned a lot in my past videos. Anywhere where they go to a new country. And this is ages 12 plus. Our next recommendation is The Upside of Falling. This is about a girl who reads a lot. She's like us guys. She's a bookworm. And she doesn't believe in true love unless it's in a book. She lies to her best friend that she does have a secret boyfriend. And then Brett, who's one of the most popular guys at their school, he hears about that lie and he's like, ugh, yeah, right. And he also can't get people off his back for not being in a relationship because he's like super successful in everything except he's not in a relationship, which is kind of weird. Like, why would people care? But anyways, they decide to fake date, and this book is really fun and cute and very funny. I laughed a lot, and Brett is just such a funny guy. I really liked the characters in this book, and I'd say this book is ages 14 plus. This is also, I think, the first book I ever read in a day. Well, I probably read some short books before, but this is like a normal length book. I read it on an 8-hour car road trip to Florida. It was pretty good. It was fun. I was entertained. Next is Again But Better. I love this book so much. This is about Shane, whose life so far in college has been just dorm, dining hall, class, repeats. She goes home every weekend to her parents' house. Friends, what is that? Romance, what is that? And she's tired of that and tired of always staying in her introverted bubble. So she signs up for a semester abroad in London, and she tells her parents it's for pre-med, but it's actually for writing and journalism. And it's really fun to see how she gets settled in London, her new life there, new friends, new dorm, new place, exploring the country, and also how she deals with all of that as being an introvert and if she gets overwhelmed from stepping out of her bubble. And this book is about second chances, not in romance, but like in life. At the beginning of this book, I was like, okay, so this is where the second chance is. Again, but better. That makes sense. But then unexpected plot twist, and you're like, oh, this is what they meant by Again But Better. This is definitely one of my favorite books ever. Another study abroad book. And I just love this so much. And this is ages 12 plus, but I feel like more mature teens will enjoy it since the characters are just older. Like, they're all college age. And there's a romance side plot, but mainly this is a contemporary with a splash of romance, which is honestly how I prefer it. And their last romance or contemporary book recommendation is 10 Blind Dates. This is technically a Christmas book, but it's just so good. I had to put it in here. Our main character, I forgot what her name is, her boyfriend breaks up with her and she's heartbroken. And when she goes to like her grandparents' big house with a bunch of different relatives and cousins, they try to cheer her up and also try to find a new boyfriend for her. And she's still not over her ex, so she doesn't want that, but she ends up just going along with it to make everyone happy. And they set her up, different family members set her up for 10 different blind dates. They like each choose a person and a location for her to go on, and it's really funny like seeing everyone. And overall the book is just super funny. I love her relationship with all her family members and relatives and uncles and aunts and cousins, and it was just so good. I loved it. And then there's also a second book, 10 Truths and a Deer, which is about her cousin and her cousin's story, and like the same characters are in it, and I highly recommend reading them both. First read 10 Blind Dates though. And I think this series is probably 13 plus. Now let's get on with fantasy. First is a fantasy series that I read recently and I absolutely loved it. I haven't finished it yet, but I will soon. And that is Rebel of the Sands. If you've watched my videos before, you'd see me raving about these books. First book was so good. So was the second. It literally just gets better and better. And I have not read the third book yet. And we're back. Amani is the desert girl who grew up in her village, and it's kind of like a Western and Arabic crossover because they live in the desert, but everyone is kind of giving cowboy vibes. But when a criminal comes to her village, she ends up leaving with him, escaping her village, and they go on this adventure across the desert together, and that is just so fun to read about their journeys across the desert and joining the rebel groups. And there's also magic and like dangerous things in the desert and people who are like demigods kind of. I think they're called Demji, and they have powers. And this was just such a fun fantasy book. I am so happy that I got this and that I read this, and I'm so excited to read the third book. And I think this series is also probably 13 plus. Next fantasy recommendation is The Night Circus. This also technically isn't a young adult book, but there's nothing really inappropriate in it. There are kind of like some darkish themes, so I'd say this book is good for ages 15 plus, maybe 16 plus, but this is a slow-paced one and definitely does take kind of like a while to get through it, but it is so good anyway. I'm so glad that I read this finally. I had it for so long, but I read this recently and I loved it. It took me like 2 months or something to read it. It gives off really whimsical, dark vibes, and the writing is just so immersive, and the characters are so good, and the story and the plot, and there's kind of like time jumps. So one chapter it's like in the past, the next one in the future, the next one in between, which seems like it would make it confusing, but they're well placed and kind of make perfect sense the way they're placed. So I think this is definitely a masterpiece of a book, and we follow a cast of lots of different characters. There's also a big game, and everything kind of revolves around this circus. Next is Caraval, which I think is kind of similar in a lot of aspects to the Night Circus. It's whimsical, they're in a game, there are many mysteries, and a lot of things are actually darker than they seem, and we have a lovely romance in here. Lovely story, lovely plot, great characters, although one character is really annoying in my opinion. I think we all know who we're talking about. I haven't read the rest of the series yet, but I'm really excited to, and I hope to read it soon. Scarlett has never left her tiny island home ever. Her dad is the mayor or whatever there, and he's really like a bad man, and she's scared of him, and she has an arranged marriage coming soon. But then she and her sister end up getting tickets to the Caraval, which is a game on a different island. Scarlett doesn't want to go, but she ends up going anyway. I think they force her to go somehow. Anyways, as soon as they arrive, her sister Donatella gets captured or like disappears, and Scarlett has to figure out where she is, and she's forced to play the game. Kind of gives like darkish Alice in Wonderland vibes also, and I'd say this is ages 13 or 14 plus. Our next recommendation is also similar to that whimsical Alice in Wonderland vibe, and that is Heartless. Now, if you've been watching me, you know that I love this book. I talk about it whenever I can. This is an Alice in Wonderland retelling about the Queen of Hearts, so it's like a villain origin story, and oh my gosh, this is literally one of my favorite books ever. Anything by Marissa Mayer is honestly bomb.com.
And the romance and everything, and the story, and the characters, and the vibes, and the writing, everything is just so good.
Our main character, Catherine, is the most desirable girl in Wonderland. Her mom wants her to pursue a courtship with a king, but all Catherine wants is to just open a bakery and bake. But then she meets Jest, the royal Jest or Joker, and a little forbidden romance sparks, and it just takes you on a whole roller coaster of emotions, and it feels like a dream. I think it's best suitable for ages 13 plus. Marissa Mayer just writes such great love interests and romances. It feels like I'm literally falling in love with the characters. I do not know how she does it, but she does. Our next book recommendation is the Lunar Chronicles series. This is also written by Marissa Mayer, so you already know it's gonna be good. This is a series of retellings also. There are 4 main books of this series, a novella, and a book of short stories. There's a reading order to all this. I remember I searched up what the author said the best reading order is, and I read it that way, and it was just so worth it. Like, everything aligned together perfectly. Anyways, in the first book, it's a retelling of Cinderella, and everything kind of has like a sci-fi futuristic twist. So it's kind of fantasy, but also kind of sci-fi because it's set in our world, but a lot in the future. And the second book is Red Riding Hood. Then we have Rapunzel and Snow White. And despite what it sounds like, that each has its own story, it's the same adventure that continues on. This series is ages 12 plus, and this is just one of my top favorite series ever. It took me only a month to read all of these. Our next recommendation is The Witch Haven. This is kind of underrated. It's a a historical fiction about witches that attend a boarding school in New York City. So it's like old time New York City, and it really gives off dark academia vibes. And I really enjoyed this. It's kind of different from what I normally read, kind of different from your usual fantasy book, because I'd say it's more of a mix between fantasy and historical fiction. There's also a second book, but I have not read that yet. And I'd say this is probably 14 plus. And the last fantasy series I'm going to be recommending is technically a middle grade series, but I have to put it in here. It's so good. And that is the False Prince series. I did not expect to love this as much as I did. These are my sister's books, but I read them after her. And I think there's 5 books in the series, but my sister only has 4. And I haven't read the 4th book yet because she hasn't read it yet. And she isn't allowing me to read it until she reads it. So I hope she reads it soon so that I can read this. But this is super fun, adventurous. Sage is just such a wonderful, charismatic, hilarious, relatable character. And I just love him so much. Each book is just so worth it just for him and his lines. I really wanted to underline a lot of stuff in this book, but I knew my sister would be very mad if I wrote stuff in her book. So I had to hold myself back from doing that. But in the first book, it's basically Sage and a bunch of other orphans are training to become the prince. They're gonna impersonate the prince who disappeared a few years ago, and they're being trained by this lord, like sussy guy, who wants them to be on the throne so that he controls them so that they control the throne. You know, that kind of scheming plot. And yeah, this is a lot of like courtly intrigue, politics, but I kind of like reading about that. Like when it's written well, it can be fun and not boring. Like The Cruel Prince, for example, this baby right here, those court politics are really fun to read about, and I just love that series so much. I recommend it in a different fantasy book recommendation video, and the series is rated 10 plus. Now to move on to dystopian. And the first dystopian book I'm going to recommend is The Darkest Minds. This is so underrated and so good. I did not expect to love this as much as I did. This is about kids who have powers. Obviously, it's a dystopian. And now the government is like trying to control them, but they run away. Uniting together all these kids with powers. And it's just kind of like what most dystopians revolve around. It's your classic kids with powers against the government. And the kids' powers are on different levels of dangerous. Like there's the greens. I forgot what their power is, but I think it's something harmless, like controlling electronics or something. Then the blues, I don't know what their power is. Then different colors. And there's also the oranges, whose power is a lot more dangerous, and the main character has that power. And this is ages 12 plus. Next is the Red Queen, or just Red Queen. In this world, there are silvers and reds. That's the color of their blood. The silvers have powers, and they're kind of treated like godly figures, super rich, the important ones. And then reds are just like lowly commoners who work for them. And Mir, she and her family are reds, and they have always been reds. But when an incident occurs and Mir realizes that she has powers, but she has red blood, everybody is just so confused and even scared of her, and like, what the heck? This is pretty good, except for me, I didn't like it that much. Something just was a little off, maybe the writing. Like, I didn't really connect to the stories and characters that much, so I felt this wasn't really for me, but a lot of other people really liked it. I'd say the age rating for this is 12 plus. Next, we have the Renegade series. This is by Marissa Mayer. It's a dystopian about superheroes and villains that live in our world, I think, but in the future. And there's a superhero government that if you show powers, you can be recruited to work for them. Our main character girl is a villain. Our main character boy is a hero. She pretends to be a hero, starts working for the superhero government just like him, and he also has a secret of his own secret identity, and there's a secret identity romance subplot, and it's ages 12 plus. Next is Legend. Our main character was born into like very privileged family, and she's like going through some hardcore training, and then her brother gets murdered, and the most wanted criminal in the country, Day, our second character, is the main suspect. So June goes undercover to get close to him, to become his friend and find out why he did it, or to arrest him and to avenge her brother basically. But the events unfold in a way nobody could have predicted, and the two really find out what brought them together, and there's bigger mysteries in this world and sinister schemes. This is my sister's book. She also has the other books in the series, but I have not read them, and this is 12 plus. Our last dystopian rec is The Maze Runner. This is a very popular one. It has movie adaptations too. In this book, our main character boy, he remembers nothing except for his name. He wakes up in an elevator, a lift, a dark room that goes up up and opens out into a maze. There are a bunch of other boys living there too who also don't remember anything except for the name and the day that they arrived, and they've just been living there for so long and trying to get out of this maze, but they kind of are beginning to lose hope. And then one day the elevator opens and arrives not another boy but a girl, and what she says, the message she delivers, changes everything. This is quite fun how they're surviving and trying to get out, uncovering the mysteries and everything. I think this is best for ages 12 plus. Now moving on to our very last genre, mystery. I don't have a lot of recommendations for this because I don't read mystery that often. So first we have A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. I'm sure you've heard of this. This is probably one of the most hyped up young adult mysteries of the past couple years. And I read this before it even became hyped. I just saw it randomly at Target. I got it, read it, and then a few months later I started seeing it circulating through TikTok and like every social media app. Pippa, a senior, has one final project for which she decides to investigate a closed case, a case that never was really resolved, or everyone thought it was, but Pippa, she kind of sees that still suspicious, the conclusion that they reached, and she thinks there's more to this mystery than everyone lets on. So when she starts investigating, she finds out that there is more to it and that somebody is trying to stop her from getting the answers, which was pretty fun to read about, but I feel like it isn't worth the hype. Like, I liked it, but I wasn't impressed. And everyone is like,
oh my god, best mystery book in the world. Oh my gosh, read this. Oh my gosh.
And I'm like, yeah, it's good, but I don't think it's worth all of that. It's not a banger. I also heard that the UK version is slightly different from the American version, so I don't know. If you're from the UK and you read this, let me know if that's true. And I think this is best for ages 13 or 14 plus. And the last book is The Inheritance Games. This is also very hyped up everywhere, and I got it expecting to love it, but I was a little bit disappointed because it also was overhyped. It was good also. It was good. Not as good as everyone led me to believe, but I think you'll love it if you like riddles and puzzles and clues and mysteries. And I liked it especially because our main girl just became a billionaire. She just inherited $1 billion from a random man, which is really fun to read about, obviously, and really fun to read about her new, like, rich life. My mom read this series and she liked it, and my sister is currently reading this series and she's liking it too. She's on the third and final book, which is The Final Gambit, and I have not read the other 2 books yet, only the first one. So I think I'll read the others soon because I'm kind of in that mood right now, some mysteries and stuff. But I think this is best for ages 12 or 13 plus. And that is it for this video. I hope you guys liked it. Hope I helped you find a new book. But don't forget that I have a book recommendations playlist if you need some more book recommendations, because I have a lot more that I talked about in those videos. I'll link it down below. Don't forget to follow my Goodreads, social medias, and subscribe for more book and lifestyle content, and like this video if it helped you. I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye!